Hello everybody, welcome back to Eng Lang Pro's YouTube channel. My name is Tori and today we are going to be comparing some good and bad AC paragraphs. So you guys have access to this document down below and I've put a link to the 2022 VCA exam. Please read through the second text too because for section B, it's about the first pitch for kids competition, and that's the one that these ACs are based on. So read through that and maybe even have a go at writing an introduction for it and maybe one body paragraph. That's kind of what we'll go through today, I think, so that we can compare, where you fit on this continuum. And on the left here, I've got sort of a mid-range AC introduction and some body paragraphs, which are okay. They'll score you maybe a 425 if that's what you're going for. And then on the right, I've actually got the exemplar from the examiner's report. And the reason why I've included this is because VCA doesn't actually give you the best of the best responses in their exemplars. That would just be kind of giving you guys the entire answers. They don't like doing that, so they give you ones that could still be further improved. And so I've improved it, but we won't spoil that yet. So without further ado, please have a read through, pause here and write your introduction and a body paragraph, and then we'll get into comparing the good and the bad. So I've put in my FARMS SPCT acronym / initialism in here because that's what I use to tick off everything that I need in my AC introductions. So that stands for field, function, audience, relative roles, register, mode, setting, purpose, context, tenor. So let's use that to kind of compare with their introduction and see how many of those they've actually ticked off. So first, text B is an advertisement. Advertisement is nice because it gives us a little bit of a function. However, in this study design, we need one of the specific Jacobson's functions. So we'll keep an eye out for that. An advertisement for an Australian entrepreneurship youth competition. So this I've bolded because it's context. So it ticks off the C in FARMS SPCT. Aimed at encouraging the audience of parents and their children to encourage participation. So here we've got a purpose and we've got an audience, which is actually really good. The text conveys a motivational and enthusiastic tone. So I'm going to pause here for a second to talk a little bit about tone. And this is a bit of a gripe that I've picked up from general English, I think, but we never really use the word tone in English language. So we use tone a lot in general English, but when we switch over to English language, we need to switch out of using tone. And instead, it's actually not that difficult to modify your text a little bit or your AC a little bit to use the word tenor instead, where tenor means the relationship of participants. So you can say a motivational and enthusiastic tenor. That would actually be fine. That also actually ticks off the T in FARMS SPCT, while also providing some informative detail about how to apply. So this is actually a really good place where we could improve this introduction and put in our function. So instead of while also providing some informative detail about how to apply, we'll include a function. So with a referential. So referential function is one of Jacobson's functions that describes providing informative detail with a referential, and there's probably also a little bit of emotive function in there, which is quite, so we could consider putting emotive with a referential and emotive function. It combines promotional, let me bold that because that's one of our F's. FARMS SPCT. It combines promotional elements with more formal requirements, which is quite nice. This is their attempt at register. Let's be more overt with it. So it combines promotional elements. It combines informal. Did we say enthusiastic already? Childlike. I'm talking about the parts where they've got like lots of exclamation marks and using parallelism, and yeah. informal, enthusiastic, joyful, exciting. It combines informal, exciting promotional elements with more formal, with a more formal, and we could say entrepreneurial register, or we could say institutional register, professional. I think I'm going to go with professional because they do switch up when they start to talk about the rules of the competition. It becomes a much more professional register with a more formal, professional. Accidentally controlled it. Control F. More formal, professional register. All right, so now if we look through, we've got our register and we've correctly identified that it switches up, and that's really important because I've got a feeling that VCA will probably put a mixed register text, if not a mixed mode text, which a lot of the times comes with a mixed register as well. So you need to correctly identify that they are including both informal and formal elements. Super important. So we've got our field kind of, yes, we've got field in our context, I would say. So entrepreneurial field, function, yes, audience, yes. Relative roles, they don't even mention who first pivot is. So who's actually the author, which is a bit of a no-no. So text B is an advertisement from from a company. I mean, let's actually check what they say. This is why it's important to read the background information, guys. All right, section C, section A, B. Okay, largest youth entrepreneurship run by First Pivot. Okay, so it doesn't really say who First Pivot actually is. Okay, cool. We'll just put from from company. Let's put from the website of First Pivot, from First Pivot's website. From First Pivot's website, because then website gives us a bit more context as well, situational context, because it tells us why there might be hyperlinks, for example, in the text, which obviously wouldn't be the case in a spoken discussion. So now we've kind of got the relative roles. I think that I think we could probably improve it a bit more by saying who First Pivot actually is. They're a company trying to encourage, but we've got a little bit of that here. So we'll leave that there. Mode, I don't think we have. So is a written. So easy, guys, to start your first sentence with this text is a written, spoken, blah, 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 because that takes off mode from your acronym initialism farms SBCT immediately, and you never have to think about it again. Mode, setting, we talked about entrepreneurship competition, purpose, yes, context, yes, tenor, yes. So now we've kind of proved this quite a lot. So you see how this is a very bare bones introduction, but with a few edits, we can improve it a lot. On the right side, this is an example of a high scoring response, but I can tell you that there are definitely improvements that can be made to this one as well. So employing a largely informal register, this webpage is from First Pivot's website regarding their first pitch for competition. So this is nice. It tells us, okay, what the context is, who actually wrote the text, and telling us that there's a largely informal register, and they actually use the word register, which is also a big plus over the other one. We could definitely say that it needs to be more specific regarding largely informal. So what does that actually mean? It doesn't really tell us anything. Addressing an audience of children that would be interested in taking part is not quite right. They do actually also target parents a little bit, like sort of. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, read between the lines, but it is targeting parents during the rules section later on when they're kind of down here. Here are the rules open to kids. The idea must be entirely created by kids. Parents can help their kids film. keeping in mind that this is a competition for kids. So they're clearly talking to the parents here. They're not talking to the kids. So addressing an audience, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yes, and their parents alike. So they do actually include parents, sorry. First pivot seeks to inform, reflect expertise, forge solidarity, and encourage participation. So I've got some purposes there. And the playful, enthusiastic tone reflects the inspirational nature of this discourse. So tone we can definitely change 100%. And I think we can be a little bit more specific because we haven't actually included one of the functions that needs to be included. So I've taken this introduction and I've improved it even further. So employing a mixed formality, authoritative, and encouraging register. So remember that register is not just formality. It actually, in the study design, talks about how language changes to fit the entire context of a discussion. This written web page, I think they didn't even talk about the mode here. So I'm not sure really that VCAR should be saying this is a high scoring response when there are clearly some very, very, very small things that could have elevated it a lot. Webpage from First Pivot's website regarding their First Pitch for Kids competition and Australian Youth Entrepreneurship competition. So context, we got a little bit like, okay, there's a competition that they're advertising, but they didn't tell us what it is, which actually was much better in the worst AC intro. Addressing an audience of curious children and their parents alike, First Pivot seeks to reflect expertise and encourage participation through a referential and poetic function. Okay, so I said poetic here. Yeah, I think that there's definitely both emotive and poetic functions here. When they talk about like this sort of thing with a bit of parallelism almost, yeah, it's definitely both, and they're definitely up here. We've got, are you a budding inventor, quirky scientist? Quite emotive as well as poetic, so they would let both of those slide. The playful and enthusiastic tenor between First Pivot and their young audience reflects the inspirational nature of this discourse. So all the green bits have been included by me to this introduction from the exemplar, and it's now much more elevated. It's a much stronger introduction than it originally was. So, takeaways. Comparing good and bad AC paragraphs for introduction only, just rely on your firm's SPCT and practice that. So by the time I went into my final exam, I knew I was going to start my introduction with this as a written or spoken blah, blah, blah context regarding whatever field with a something function, blah, blah, blah. You can take 3 or 4 of these farms SPCT elements and put them into one sentence. That way you can write your introduction in 3 sentences. This one is a bit longer, I think. 3 sentences. So we've ticked off everything from the acronym, initialism both, in 3 sentences. So practice that. It'll get easy and it'll get quick. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the body paragraph. So I think we'll just cover one. Let's talk about different sentence types on the left. We'll talk about the sort of mid-range scoring one first. So this text uses different sentence types to engage readers. Okay, sure. For example, rhetorical questions such as, are you up for the challenge, to invite children to think about whether they should participate. Imperatives such as, show us what you've got, also add to the persuasive effect by directly addressing the reader. Exclamatory sentences create excitement and make the competition appear fun and engaging. So a few things immediately stick out to me if I were the examiner for this piece. First of all, just the very last sentence. They state something without providing evidence. And this is a massive no-no. Never, ever say something is true without explaining why or including something from the text that, supports your statement. So exclamatory sentences create excitement, sure, but are there even exclamatory sentences in this text? I have no idea, okay? So this is a super, super big no-no. Do not include statements without evidence. Super, super big no-no. second gripe I kind of have with this is that the very first thing that this entire paragraph is about is sentence types. And this is very nitpicky and would completely be fine and not lose any marks. But the difference between these two paragraphs on each side of the screen, if you think about it bigger picture wise, is that on the right side, we talk about one sentence type, but that sentence type is also a subheading, so it's also formatting. And then we go on to first person plural subject pronouns. And then we go on to talk about parallelism. These are all much more salient features than sentence types. And I find this a lot with students who have a lot of potential but aren't quite getting there, is they fall back upon things like sentence types or even like word classes to describe the function, purpose, register, context, tenor, when that's just not the salient features. And the whole point of an AC is for you to pick out the most salient features in the text. So super important for you guys to think about, am I just writing about sentence types? One, because they're super salient and important to this text, or am I using it multiple times because I feel that I don't have something else to talk about? In which case you need to practice picking out the more salient features like parallelism, like subheadings for cohesion and coherence. This is really nuanced, but when you open your first paragraph with 3 examples of sentence types, I just feel that you haven't understood the entire purpose of the text, which is something like parallelism is massive and you need to talk about it because it's super, it's straight in your face. This is like a clear indication that they have a certain encouraging purpose or poetic function even. Okay. The use of listing and dot points gives the text structure and makes it easier to read. Okay, sure. I think this kind of, again, is very indicative of a sort of mid-range scoring compared to a higher scoring AC, which would have the exact same actual content of their sentence, but say it in a much nicer way. So the use of listing and dot points gives text structure and makes it easier to read, compared to the comprehensibility of this text is improved by features that support cohesion and coherence, such as, and then go on to talk about listing and dot points. And you'll find that this is the same. When you compare this side with their intro sentences, it's always starting with the actual feature. The text uses different sentence types, or listing and dot points, or the text employs inclusive pronouns. And I think that a better way to start your sentences is something like, first pivot draws upon a variety of linguistic features in order to, so the function of the purpose of that feature before going into it. So it's a bit more of an introductory sentence. When outlining the rules, they use various lexical and discourse features to communicate. Okay, so listing and dot points gives the text structure, makes it easier to read. For instance, the text explains what value can mean. It lists different options like financial, social, happiness, impact. This provides clarity and breaks down more complex ideas for a younger audience. Similarly, the instructions about how to apply are presented clearly in numbered steps, which supports comprehension. And I think that this is, again, another example of how when you are not confident in using salient features, you'll end up describing them as less than they actually are. So financial, social, happiness, impact, they actually talk about it in this side as well, I think. Maybe they don't. But either way, when they list it out here, you need to kind of talk about more than just the fact that they've listed out value. They've also, first of all, they've actually capitalized value, which is non-standard. Then they did mention dot points, but you need to say they're all different dot points. You need to talk about how they've then also used emphasis or underlining and how that contributes to cohesion and coherence. And then link to the whole function of this. So it's quite either poetic or emotive, depending on which way you go about it. And both of them are fine. But just saying that they list out value is not that's not actually what they're trying to do. They're not trying to provide clarity and break down complex ideas by listing different options. The clarity, sure, comes with the dot points, but the actual purpose of that is to get people to get excited, to be like, yeah, I could be like these people. So I would argue that whenever you see something like dot points, in a text like this where they also have underlining, and it's very much got an underlying emotive or poetic function, to not be afraid to talk more about the content of it as well. Okay, now let's have a look at the exemplar response. So, First Pivot draws upon a variety of linguistic features in their introduction to the First Pitch for Kids competition in order to entice readers. It's a nice topic sentence. It introduces what they're about to say. The bolded interrogative subheading, "Are you up for the challenge?" is used on line 2 as First Pivot leads into their introduction of and calls upon potential candidates to take part in their competition. So here we've got the exact same example. So they say rhetorical questions such as, "Are you up to the challenge?" to invite children to think about whether they should participate. Here they've got, it's a bolded interrogative subheading. So don't forget that a lot of the times features actually overlap. So this is not only an interrogative, it's actually also part of formatting. So it's worth thinking about multiple factors. First Pivot leads into the introduction. The bolding of this subheading draws emphasis to this call to action while also supporting reader navigation of the discourse, which builds coherence. So again, they're talking about more than one factor that contributes to the purpose of this feature. On line 3, the first person plural subject pronoun we is used as well as the possessive determiner our when First Pivot states that they are seeking to recognize young entrepreneurs. By employing the personal pronoun and a more personal determiner, First Pivot seeks to humanize their brand and reflect a warm and personal identity. So here we're talking a little bit more about identity and also close social distance and their purposes, and really intense about how they want to come across. So that's really good because humanizing their brand, for example, is a really good example of intent in particular. Parallelism and listing of the indefinite article adjective noun structure. So I would say that the using of word classes in indefinite article adjective noun structure is superfluous and they don't need that. That's because indefinite article adjective noun is not the most salient part of this feature. The more salient part is the parallelism and the listing. They already said the features. They don't need to say what word class each word is. That's just going over the top and it's going to waste your time because it takes a little while to work out what each word is in terms of word class. And it just doesn't add anything to what it does as parallelism and listing. First Pivot poses the various skills that applicants can have, such as a quirky scientist, creative artist, aspiring engineer. Mirrored structures, so parallelism, link the various identities that First Pivot proposes together, while the listing creates a semantic thread of various skills. So it's kind of hard to describe listing sometimes. I quite like the semantic thread, but it's a little bit abstract, and that's okay. I mean, listing is usually just to provide a lot of information in a small, in one sentence instead of multiple. And yeah, it's to build cohesion, which they say in the next thing. So this serves to build cohesion and inform readers. In the one thing they do actually say in every examiner's report is that none of the answers have been corrected for grammar. So that's what this student who scored very well did in their actual exam. They miswrote information for Inform. Inform readers, the First Pitch for Kids competition is one that involves a range of skills. The crafted nature of this feature reflects the planned nature of the discourse. So here we've got two saying nature twice, and that's not, it could definitely be improved. So it reflects the in fact, you don't even need the crafted nature. Although you could say the planned, the careful construction of this feature reflects the planned nature of the discourse and increases formality. Nice. So when you compare the two paragraphs on the left to this one big paragraph, which size does not have any influence on your mark. So don't worry about how long paragraphs are. They need to make sense with the content. So one paragraph about certain, let's say, register features, compared to another paragraph that comes later about context. That's what's more important than just how long the paragraph is. And I would argue that actually this paragraph could probably be better ordered. And the reason for that is because the first feature that they talk about is about calling upon and grabbing the attention of the audience. And then they go on to talk about social distance and identity, and then again talk about cohesion as well as bringing in the audience. So I think that middle part about our and we, which is about closing social distance, could actually be put in a different paragraph where they talk entirely about the identity and the relative roles and power between first pivot and the audience. I'm going to leave it there because I think there's more, there's more that you guys can get out of this if you have a read through it yourself. But I've laid out for you the main differences, right? So on the left, we've got the content. The content is there and is correct. However, there's a bit too much emphasis on non-salient features, and also just vocabulary-wise, there could definitely be improvements in terms of how eloquent the speech is. That's just something that comes with practice and using a thesaurus and things like that. On the right side, we've got a much better, but still could be improved, VCA Examiner's Report Exemplar. Just be careful to make sure that whichever way you write your AC, it's logical, it makes sense, the examples follow on well within the paragraph. And we'll just quickly go to the bottom and talk about the actual feedback that they gave in the examiner's report. So higher scoring responses identified these shifts in registers that I talked a bit about at the start and explored the reasons why they occurred. They should take care that they are selecting relevant features. So again, always talk about the most salient features, and high-scoring responses focused on stylistic and discourse features that directly contributed to the register, social purpose, and contextual factors affecting and surrounding the text. So the actual question in the exam for section B says specifically that you need to talk about context, register, purpose, and function. So make sure that all your features, at least at the start of your AC, directly talk about these factors, and that's super important before you go on to talking about things like cohesion and coherence, which of course indirectly contribute to these. So that'll be it for today. I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope this has been helpful, even wherever you fall on this continuum, that you can improve no matter what and really get to the best that you can for the exam. So that's all. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.